from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Welcome. It's the Wednesday night edition of the program. It's hump day, or hump night, if you will. And we're continuing some of the talk that we had from yesterday that we got into and didn't really put a pin in, plus everything else that's going on in America tonight. And we're going to get into the Olympic controversy. We got a couple of champion and pro boxers that are joining us in a little bit to help us understand that. We're also going to talk about Tim Walz. That's the big story, right? Tim Walz, he may have embellished a little bit of his military record. We're going to get into that with someone who ran for governor in Minnesota and knows Tim Walz very, very well. And I also want to get into this Google censorship stuff. So lots to discuss. But I want to start with a little bit of a clip here on the background. The background on Tim Walz's military career. Tom Bernards and another former sergeant named Hull and a couple others. These guys, they signed this letter against him and against what he was doing, and it's really interesting. There's an interview that he just did, and I want you to listen to this because again, this is Tom Bernards. He's on Alpha News. He's the man who replaced Governor Walz on the battlefield when he was supposed to go to Iraq and then just retired his military career and decided to get into politics instead. Listen to this.
The public needs to know how pathetic his leadership was as a National Guardsman.
On a 150-year-old farm in Brewster, Tom Behrens hopes his tell-it-like-it-is style will finally get the attention he believes it deserves in Minnesota's race for governor. In a way, he's back again to wage a public war of words against Tim Walz.
He abandoned us, you know. I mean, what the hell kind of leader does that? I mean, he just, as soon as the shots were fired in Iraq, he turned and ran the other way and hung his hat up and quit.
We'll get to Behrens' new message for voters in a moment. But this all starts years earlier when Behrens says Walz's misleading statements about his military service first led him to come forward in the fall of 2018.
So you try to get this message out, but Minnesota's largest newspaper checks it out, says it's 100% true, but yet refuses to print.
When I hung the phone up, I said, what the hell is this, North Korea?
Back in 2005, a warning order went out to the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery to mobilize for a mission to Iraq. At the time, Walz served as the unit's highest non-commissioned officer, but months later, Walz would retire from the Guard, avoid the deployment, and run for Congress. Tom Behrens was next in line for the position and was asked to take his place.
I was like, well, for Pete's sake, if this guy quit, and if I say I'm not going to do it, I mean, what the hell kind of leadership is that? If a company would say that we're going to deploy to Iraq or somewhere and you're going to be gone for whatever amount of time, and then a foreman just says, no, I'm not going. I mean, what does that say to the 500 people that work in that factory?
Behrens would go on to serve in Iraq on a nearly 2-year deployment as a command sergeant major. All while Walz began using that title as a congressman. Behrens says he first contacted Walz with his concerns, sending these letters to Washington. They all went unanswered.
But then we fast forward to the election in 2018 in Minnesota, and you try at that time to get people's attention with this story and also with what seems to be a very misleading statement that he continued to make about his service.
It kind of just sat there. You know, when he was a congressman, he bragged that he was a command sergeant, retired command sergeant major. I'm the highest ranking person ever in the House, and, you know, all this lie that he was telling. The state of Minnesota came out after 2018, after this was exposed, and they said, well, he can say that he served as a command sergeant major, but he can't say he's a retired one because he's not.
That, of course, again, is Tom Bernards. He is the man that replaced Governor Walz on the battlefield, claiming that he chose a career in politics instead of his duty of going to serve. And I want to get into that and a little bit more about who is Tim Walz, right? We only know what we're seeing in the media, but I want to get the skinny from Kendall Qualls. He's a former candidate for governor of Minnesota, a former Army officer, and he's going to be our guest in a moment. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I came from a family where nobody in my family had ever gone to law school. I grew up in a poor family. The fact that Tim Walz wants to turn it into a bad thing, that I actually worked myself through college, through law school, and made something myself. To me, that's the American dream. And if Tim Walz wants to insult it, I think that's frankly pretty bizarre. Now, look, what really bothers me about Tim Walz, it's not even the positions that he's taken, though certainly he has been a far left radical. You know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq, to make a promise that you're going to follow through, and then to drop out right before you actually have to go.
Right before you have to go. Well, again, he's proud of his military service, and someone else that served in the military proudly is our guest, Kendall Qualls. He also went on to be the vice president of a Fortune 100 corporation. And Kendall Qualls also ran for governor of Minnesota, and he's our guest now to react to what J.D. Vance had to say outside Air Force Two, and with respect to Governor Walz's military record. Kendall Qualls, welcome to the program.
Rich, thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for your service. I want to get, I guess, the most intimate look at this I can. I think few people are as well-versed as you on this. You've done this. You've ran for governor. You served in the military. What's your whole thought on all of this?
Well, first of all, there's several things. Number one, and there are a lot more people that are intimate about this information than I am, but from what the details reveal is that the Governor Tim Walz, re-enlisted for a 4-year assignment or contract extension. And as a result of that, he made a commitment. And whether he was a command sergeant major or a sergeant major or
master sergeant,
the whole aspect is he even missed. He decided to resign and retire prior to that commitment that he gave. And at the time of his retirement, it was right before the deployment. So not only did he not leave when the country called him as a senior leader in that organization, but he reneged on the commitment, his 4-year or 6-year commitment, either one it was, wasn't sure. He agreed that he did it early. Is egregious to leadership and commitment. And that's character. That's character related, and it's consistent from what we've seen in the state of Minnesota with his leadership.
Let's talk about that because obviously there's a lot of people that have written these letters and taken exception to his military record. There is some reports even from the Minnesota National Guard. They're also taking exception, saying that his biography is incorrect. And some may think these are insignificant things, but I think you're making the right case here, right? That that this really has a lot to do with his character, to who he is as a leader, and how he's governing as governor of Minnesota. So let's talk about that. Why did you run for governor? Obviously, you saw a vacuum, you saw a problem, some sort of deficit with Governor Walz. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give your listeners an idea, I spent my entire life in the private sector. I mean, just like J.D. Vance, my story is very similar. I'm older than J.D. Vance. I grew up after my dad came back from Vietnam. My parents divorced, and we moved from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, to Harlem, New York, in the late 1960s, early 70s.
Wow.
That's where my maternal grandparents lived. My 4 other siblings, we all moved there. We got held up on day one. It was the worst of the worst. It was worse. New York City was worse then than it is even now, if you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. And I was there from 1st to 5th grade. I know what powdered eggs taste like. I know what government surplus cheese tastes like. I know the violence and everything that goes with it. And then my father got me and my younger brother to live with him in 5th grade. And so 5th grade on, I lived with my dad. He was a drill sergeant. He was still in the military. And we lived in a trailer park in Oklahoma because he was paying child support and alimony. So we didn't have much. And I paid my way through school, went to grad school, got my MBA from the University of Michigan. I served on active duty. When Tim Walz was in China teaching Chinese kids English, I was serving on the DMZ in North Korea and South Korea, right on the border between the two, North and South Korea. Here's what I got out of my time in service. And that's something I would never do that Tim Walz did last week. Learning what socialism and communism is in real life, living it, seeing it in real life, I never would have categorized socialism as someone else's neighborliness.
Right.
I've never known anyone that served in uniform that would hold socialism or to try to defend it and hold it up to just friendly neighborliness. I lived in socialist, I escaped it. And basically what all of our inner cities are islands of socialism. Childbirth is paid by the government. Your school is paid by the government. The lunches and breakfasts and all the meals are paid by the government. Your housing is paid by the government, and your food is paid by the government. And I wouldn't want to wish that on my worst enemy. They're the worst places to live in our country. Even people that live there don't want to live there. And it's inner city Black Americans, inner city minorities, anyone that lives around will have to work near them. You just never know what's going to happen. And that's what socialism is all around the world, and even in our country, the freest country in the world, and he defends it. And even in Minneapolis, and Rich, to give you an idea, this is under Tim Walz's leadership during his reign here. In October in 2009, Forbes magazine ranked the top 25 cities on quality of life, safety being one of the big parameters, quality of life and cleanliness. Minneapolis was ranked number 1 in October of 2009 by Forbes magazine. Today, the shadow of itself. People of Minnesota avoid going downtown. Hotels and office buildings are at the highest level of vacancies they've been in decades. And that's under Tim Walz. He's allowed that to happen.
Despicable folks. I just want to remind you, we're on with former candidate for governor of Minnesota, Kendall Qualls. He was vice president in the private sector for a Fortune 100 corporation, served as an officer in the U.S. Army, and giving us some commentary on not only an amazing story, an amazing come-up, but his experience dealing with Governor Walz specifically. So you saw all this going on, right? And we saw it. And I think Trump did a great job today. He put a tweet out, or a Truth Social post that said, Tim Walz let Minnesota burn. Kamala Harris bailed out the people that lit the match. And I thought it was just striking and really well put. So you run, and what was it that got to you? Was it the vacancies? Yeah. Was it seeing Minnesota fall apart? No, what really sparked the interest for you?
Well, this happened a few years ago when the whole systemic racism and white privilege and hey, the reason why Black Americans are living and you see these huge disparities in how their standard of living, financial and academic disparities, it's because of white privilege, it's because of systemic racism. I said, that's not true. That's a lie. My parents lived through the Jim Crow South. They lived through systemic racism. I did not. In fact, what I tell people is, look, both my parents and my in-laws lived through Jim Crow South systemic racism. They never grew up hating the country. They encouraged us that you can still make it in this country, work hard, get a good education, live by the values that we've taught you from our Christian heritage. And do we have disparities? We do have huge disparities. But here's the dirty little secret. And I wrote an op-ed in this in the Federalist, and telling President Trump that if he promises to put policies in place to restore the two-parent Black family that the Democrats destroyed, he'll win a significant percentage of the Black community. Because, Rich, in my lifetime, the Black community has gone from 80% two-parent families to 80% fatherless homes without one initiative to reverse the trend. That's not Republican, Democrat. That's the difference between good and evil.
Right.
And the Democrats put that policy in place in the late 60s to provide welfare programs. Basically, what it provided was that you'll get this monthly stipend, this free apartment, or a significantly subsidized apartment, as long as there is no adult male living in the home. You can't be married, or the father can't be living in the home with you. It's the first time in American history where we financially incentivize women to have children outside of marriage. And
absolutely horrible.
I tell people I have all the data for 100 years that shows this, and it's all U.S. Census data. From 1890 to 1970, Black women were more likely to be married than white women during that time frame. And then you see a huge spike of unmarried women and a huge spike of illegitimate births in our country starting in the early 1970s, and it hasn't stopped since.
Folks, Kendall Qualls, former candidate for governor of Minnesota, and our guest. Now, how do you make it? And we only have, I guess, probably about a minute or so to go. But what do you do now? Right? You ran for governor. You're going to run again now that you see this guy's probably going to be hopefully out of a job soon, right? Not because he's going to get elected, but because hopefully he'll lose for VP, and the Minnesotans will wake up.
Right. So right now I am a faculty and resident at a private Christian college in Minnesota, at Crown College. I teach at the School of Business. That's my background. And I'm also president and founder of a nonprofit foundation called Take Charge. And basically we promote that the promise of America is available to anyone, regardless of race or social standing. And out of our organization, we're starting private Christian schools throughout Minnesota and across the country.
Wow. Maybe we should have you back soon to talk about that, because I think that's something that we need, alternatives to public education. Kendall Qualls, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I want to thank you for staying up late with us, sir.
You bet. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you, too. All right, folks, straight ahead, we continue our conversation with you all, the callers, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Let's be clear. 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 Let's talk about what it really is. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job. But all they did see, now they about to see this other Corey, this other side. Because let me say this. I just grew up a whole lot more over the last few weeks. Just grew up a whole different way. And so what they are about to get, they think, so the thing is this. The thing is this, I don't think that anything, there is nothing that happens in my life that happens in vain. So if this happened, it's because it was meant to happen. And let me say, it's because the work that I need to do. And let me say this, AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down.
All right, now Cori Bush is a preacher. That is Cori Bush, current congresswoman who's soon to be former congresswoman because she lost her primary yesterday, so she's going to lose her seat in Congress. She won't be able to defend it. And she is a preacher. I believe she's a pastor is what her bio says. And I don't know. Listen, I've dabbled with Christianity over the years. I've been one for probably most of my adult life. And my whole life, honestly, but more committed, I'd say, after like 19 or so. And ultimately, I can't think of a time where I was inspired by the scriptures to say, I'm coming to burn your kingdom down, like she just said. I just don't, I'm not inspired that way. Maybe, there's others that have a different interpretation than I do, like Reverend Bush, but I don't have that interpretation. But I can say, amen, praise God, hallelujah, santo. Why? Bendito sea el Señor. Why is the Lord holy? I'll tell you why. Because we've got one less squad member, and that's good news. It's good news to have one less squad member because, listen, she's part of a little crew, right? And this is the crew that is pushing America over the edge. Everybody thinks, you oftentimes hear this this adage. People always say things like, this isn't the Democrat Party that my parents were part of. This is my grandmother's Democrat Party. Parties evolve. Everything evolves. And I get that. An evolution in the party doesn't mean that you change what the party believes, right? It means you change the makeup of the party, right? Maybe it was once a bunch of old white men, perhaps. And now it's not. Or the Dixiecrats, right? The racist Democrats, the founders of the KKK, right? This is all Democrat Party history. So maybe there's an evolution from that where they don't stick with that anymore. Lamentably, we know that they do. But it'd be great. And again, before somebody takes that out of context, what I mean is I don't believe that the Democrat Party is giving birth to the KKK today. I believe that the Democrat Party embraces racism, and they do it under the guise of DEI. They do it for the exclusion of whites, and they've redefined it from the academic level so that every lawyer that's trained, so that every professional that comes out, every teacher that's trained, comes out with a view where they say things like, you can't be racist towards white people. I can't take anything away from them. Now, this is a bad look, right? It's a bad way of looking at the world because it makes every last person, if you even want to go down the rabbit hole of saying they have white privilege, I would call it more legacy, right? And I say legacy because of this. If you've been able to amass wealth, now for some people amassing wealth takes a little time, right? Maybe it takes 2 generations, 3 generations, whatever. For some, it doesn't take as much. I'll give you an example. Kanye West. His mom was a college professor. Okay, so she had a decent life, but I don't think she was an extraordinarily wealthy woman. But he became extraordinarily wealthy. So, he's the breakout star in his family. Or even better, I'll use this as an example. Puff Daddy, right? Sean Diddy Combs. Puff Daddy, for years, has had a house not far from where I live, maybe 25 minutes away. Nothing like the neighborhood I live in Alpine, right? He's out in Alpine, New Jersey. And Alpine's got these, $5, $10 million houses and up. I don't think you can buy a house for $1 million there. And the point I'm making is when Justin Combs, or Prince Combs, I think that's his other son, when they're driving around town in their Lamborghini, their Ferrari, whatever they're driving, And let's say they get pulled over for whatever the infraction is. And they give them their license, and it says, I'm Justin Combs, son of Puff Daddy. And they know. The cops in town know who lives in town, right? That's part of what they're doing. Oh, so-and-so lives over here. Make sure you watch out. This guy's a rap mogul. Make sure, people might want to come take pictures. Just keep an eye on this house. They know what's going on in town. They know who's who. So when they see this kid, and let's say they pull him over for something, I wonder if he gets the same treatment that someone that may look identical to him would get somewhere else. I'm thinking likely not. And it's not because of racism, because he's still a young black kid, right? So he's not getting pulled over for driving while black. He's probably getting pulled over for whatever young. When I was young, I got pulled over for playing my music loud. Back then, tinted windows weren't allowed. I had tinted windows, whatever. Point is, I'm pretty sure it's like, oh, hi, Mr. Combs, how are you? Listen, you rolled through the stop, or you played your music too loud, or whatever it was. Listen, I'm going to give you a warning today. Just, be careful, blah, 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 right? And they give him the benefit of the doubt. Why? They treat you like a gentleman. Why? Because there's legacy. Because his dad is somebody. Now he's somebody else, right? Now he's a trafficker or alleged trafficker. He's in all sorts of heat now. But my point is, I'm going to bet they treat him differently. And it's not because he's black. It's because his family has a name. They've made a name for themselves. Now, today, that may be a name they're not so proud of. I understand that. But my point is they made a name. Same thing with Kanye's kids. When they go out there, I think his oldest daughter's name is North, right? Interesting. Northwest. It's kind of clever. And when she's out there in the world doing her thing and she gets, let's say, pulled over or stopped or bumps into some, whatever the case is, again, I don't think that racism is the issue. Why? Because there's legacy. And there's history, and there's people that know you, and they know your family name. Now, for many people, call them white people or others, and my point is it has nothing to do with race. They make it about race, the left. There's legacy. If my dad had not come from Puerto Rico, from Caguas, Puerto Rico, to the Bronx and then make his way to Brooklyn, if he didn't do that in 1955, maybe if he did it in the 1700s or the 1800s or, even earlier in the 1900s, my family would have more legacy. But that was when we started in the New York area, when my dad came here in 1955. So prior to that, there's none. We have some family tree, but not the legacy from my father. So that's my point, is that when Cori Bush, and this is a big tangent I went on, but I hate that she says that they radicalized her. No, ma'am, you were radicalized by Marx. And everything that she says here, let me be clear, let's be clear. She said that like 10 times. She makes the case that AIPAC or the supporters of the Jewish state or whomever it was that she was talking to, it's unclear, even though she's saying, let me be clear. It's unclear who she's talking to. Bottom line here is she's saying that she was held back. Oh, and she says directly to AIPAC. Let me say this, AIPAC. I'm coming to tear your kingdom down. This is not something that builds legacy. I don't think this is something that's built on race. I think this is a problem, a fight that she picked over religion. She decided to go against the Jews. She decided to do that. They didn't do that to her, right? The Jews weren't going against her. They only ran a candidate, right? The AIPAC, they only ran a candidate when she decided to be so aggressive towards any policies that that were even remotely friendly to Israel. So it makes all the sense in the world to me. What doesn't make all the sense in the world to me is the way that she portrayed this loss as if it was somehow like someone wronged her. No one wronged you. You lost, ma'am. Whatever happened to being a gracious loser? This is like Stacey Abrams. Is that her name, Stacey Abrams? Yeah, I think that was her name in Georgia. It's like her all over again. Anyway, I hope you get my point. If not, I'll beat the drum a little bit more when we come back. Plus your calls coming up. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, for Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who again will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And again, I believe that Linda Sarsour, AOC, and the left think that they've won the battle by getting this radical leftist on the VP slot here with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. But I think ultimately they're going to lose the war. And I don't think they care. The reality is, I believe that Marxists are very clever. And they're very clear in the way they think. They're always thinking of the long con, right? It's always the long game with them. They're not thinking about September, October, November, the next election. Well, that's on the radar. That is not specifically what they're focused on. What they're focused on is ushering in a new way of thinking. Ushering in what Tim Walz says, another person's neighborliness, right? When he says, one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. Or when I say, one man's Tim Walz is another man's pendejo. And I think that's accurate. The reality here is that that is really their goal, right? Now, Trump has some very concrete goals in mind. And most conservatives do. Republicans typically do. Yeah, rarely, they're out there, but it's rare that people are running just for the sake of promoting ideals. And that even when they're not running, they're still pushing those same ideals. That's AOC. These people are ideologues. And I'm not angry at them for being an ideologue. They believe in something, and that's their ideology, and good for them. But what my point is, AOC has opted to not have children so that she can fight the climate battle, so she can usher in communism, or at least what she calls democratic socialism, for generations to come. She believes in this hook, line, and sinker. She has sipped the Kool-Aid, and now she's serving it as a bartender. That's the bottom line. So when the left, Linda Sarsour, AOC, Bernie Sanders, the whole gamut, when all of them decide, look, no, we want this guy Walz. Okay, Tim Walz it is. And the reason it is because they want to bring this, they want to normalize and mainstream radicalized thinking. When they go with Cori Bush, they're trying to normalize and mainstream radicals like her. She's not radical because she's a woman. She's not radical because she's black. She's radical because she wants to eliminate the traditional family, because she was supportive of the BLM movement, not because Black Lives Matter, but because they believed in what they believed, which had very little to do with race and a whole lot to do with Marxism. And anybody who was paying attention knows that. And if they're late to the dance, then they don't know that. Bernie Sanders, right? These people all support this guy. And the reason why, because they feel that he's the right guy to carry the torch of their socialist and communist sympathizing agenda forward. He's the guy to carry that torch forward. Lamentably, the media does their job to soften the blow, just like the Pravda does with Putin, or I should say Stalin and Lenin. Their job is to soften the blow and to make them look like they're not dictators. We experience the same thing here. And it's shameful. But I want you to hear how the media refers to Tim Walz as a moderate. Listen to this.
The idea that Tim Walz is some lefty is just not true in reality. He got elected in a district that was very moderate.
Walz, of course, was very moderate in Congress.
Establishing himself as a moderate Democrat.
He had a pretty moderate record, rather moderate Democrat, viewed as a moderate Democrat.
He is a centrist. To say that he's more liberal than Vice President Harris or the most liberal congressman, which I'm sure we're going to hear, just not true.
In Congress, he was certainly a centrist, but a more centrist deal-making candidate.
Kind of a centrist Midwesterner in persona.
A more centrist type who can appeal to suburban voters.
We have heard from Democrats who know him who describe him as folksy, as somebody who can reach out to independents.
He will be able to pull over some of those more moderate voters.
He has a history of appealing to the more rural, moderate voter out there.
Moderates, even moderate Republicans.
Absolutely more moderate than people are giving him credit for right now. I would like someone to point out a place that he is different on an issue than Josh Shapiro.
I would like you to point out to me an instance where he's different on an issue than Ilhan Omar, who's from his part of town. I've seen him unequivocally endorse Ilhan Omar, right? You show me the difference. Are we now going to say that Ilhan Omar is a moderate member of Congress? I don't think anybody could say that with a straight face. Are we going to say that AOC has relatively positive things to say? If AOC says nice things about Tim Walz, if Bernie Sanders says nice things about Tim Walz, what do you think is the deal with Tim Walz? Did AOC have nice things to say about everybody else? No. She doesn't typically pull punches. She likes him because he is her comrade. Bernie Sanders likes him because he is his comrade. More when I return.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Into the phones we go. Let's go to KTVA, California, Los Angeles area. Check in with Buck. Buck, quickly, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll make it real quick. President Trump is talking about how the stock market's going to crash because of Biden. Remember in 2020, he said the same thing like a million times, and the market's up about 40% since Biden got elected. Can you explain that?
Sure. Biden got elected during a time of COVID. Lots of things were down, and that was the beginning of inflation, obviously. There was all sorts of, what were those? They blamed everything on Putin, but in reality, it was a supply chain issue because at the time, there was a lot of discrepancies and there's a word I'm looking at, disruptions to the supply chain. So obviously it had nowhere to go but up because it was so far down. What we're seeing now is a little bit different because we've bounced back from COVID. And now what we're seeing is we've printed so much money and spent so much money as a government that we've devalued our dollar through inflation. And we can't continue much further. So I think Trump is right. If they continue with the plans of the two people that are in office right now, Biden and Harris, if they are in the driver's seat much longer, there won't be much left of a dollar. So yeah, the bottom will fall out. I think putting him back in office totally changes that, and he proved that in his first 3.5 years. Buck, thanks for the call. Folks, we come back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez, and again, the number 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of our program, Wednesday night hump day, as they call it. Our phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Of course, that's Valdez with an S. You're a liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here, and I want to get into a couple of headlines because it was not the busiest day in the news, but you've got Vice President Kamala Harris. She's still paying the price. A lot of people still upset about her pick. And when I say a lot of people, I don't mean Trump and the Republicans. I mean other Democrats. The ones that seem very happy are the ones that are really further to the left than most. And what's interesting is the media, as I was saying in the previous segment, the media is really pushing a lot on making him moderate, saying, oh, he's very moderate. Plus, he's getting challenged on his military record. You've got several people now coming out saying, people that served alongside him when he retired from the Army. National Guard, saying that he cut and run. He didn't want to go to Iraq. He decided to get in politics instead, and that was that. Now, Governor Walz himself has said, no, that's not the case. Embuste, that's not true. I served with distinction. We have a flashback clip of him back in 2019, which now seems to be a bunch of lies. Listen to this.
And your military background?
I spent 24 years in the National Guard, some of that full-time. I was an artilleryman. I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. My battalion provided base security throughout the European theater from Turkey to England in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. And that same battalion is now in Iraq at this time.
So now they have taken serious exception to this because, the battalion is in Iraq, but he's not in Iraq, and he wasn't in Iraq. And the sergeant major designation that's in his bio on the governor's website, they're saying he's not allowed to do that either because he didn't retire as a sergeant major because he didn't sign up for another term. He took the lower rank. Anyway, the point is his colleagues are taking exception to him. Another group that their own colleagues are taking exception are boxers. You've got boxers that are still up in arms about this controversy that's going on with the Olympics. And that's a big deal. Because why? Because over the weekend, these fighters that are being questioned, whether they're male or female, with higher testosterone and XY hormones and whatnot, chromosomes, I should say, fought again. And now you've got boxing officials that are rolling into Paris, and they're boldly declaring that these two fighters are male. And this is from the International Boxing Association. The medical blood results, looks like the laboratory says these boxers are male. And that's what the International Boxing Association said at a chaotic press conference in Paris. The IBA, International Boxing Association, claimed on Monday at a hectic press conference that the tests on these two boxers at the center of a gender controversy show that they are, quote, male. The IBA previously said that it disqualified Algeria's Imani Khalif and Taiwan's Lin Yu Ting from its 2023 World Championships after the fighters failed gender eligibility tests without specifying what these tests were. So the Olympic Committee, right, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has different tests. And again, this controversy was going on last week, but it's continuing because they continue to fight. And this is a big deal. Now, the boxing in the French capital is run by the IOC because of financial and governance and other ethical concerns at the IBA. So because of this, I guess, territorial difference, they have this whole difference of opinion here. But this is a pretty big difference of opinion, right? Where you can't figure out if a boxer is a male or a female based on the guidelines that we have, which I think is like, whoa, that's pretty serious. So I want to welcome our guest. We've got a guest on this that really understands this topic better than most because he's a professional boxer. Carlos Famoso Hernandez, welcome, sir.
How you doing, my brother? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So listen, man, you were in the ring. You know what's going on. You've retired now, but you were IBF super featherweight champion. And what do you, when you see this, what do you, how do you feel?
Well, first of all, yeah, it's I feel a bit repulsive, with all this. It shouldn't be happening. The IBA, like you were saying, they wouldn't allow these guys to fight before. But since it's in France and it's the IOC, I believe it's more political than anything. And I guess one wants to look better in front of the world than anything to allow them to compete against real women. Because these, I guess they're intersex kind of people or athletes. They have an advantage, with testosterone. I mean, I've talked to a few of these Olympic coaches just so I could prepare myself for tonight and know what I'm talking about. And they say, yeah, they get shot up with testosterone, and that gives them more of a bone mass and something that I guess you could, when you fight, if you're fighting another person, especially a woman, you're not gonna feel that power from a girl compared to somebody who's taking testosterone.
But now, even if a girl is taking testosterone, and I get what you're saying, that won't change your XY chromosomes, right? That's something you're born with. So why do you think the Olympics is saying that they're girls if biology is saying they're not?
Well, that's why I think it's more than anything. If this is like just a big plan from deep within the state, I have really no idea from who, but I just think that this is more political than anything, and I don't think or believe this is something that they just want to. They know that this is wrong. They know that if it's a woman. Or if it's a guy, if you have XY or XX, so
right,
it doesn't make sense. And for this to happen, I just hope to God no one really gets seriously hurt.
Me too, because we've seen it in MMA where people have gotten very hurt by transgender, guys that are bigger than both you and me together, right? Guys that are 230 pounds, men that are going in there identifying as a woman and literally breaking the face of their opponent, cracking their facial bones. It's crazy.
Correct. I remember hearing that. Yes, that's true. So something like that is going to happen if nothing is done. And so something has to be done, obviously. And there's with these testosterone that you're taking, I mean, just with that, I believe it's going to give these people more of an advantage and stronger. Sure. They're going to be stronger. So somebody's going to get hurt, and
it's the equivalent of like when the baseball players take the performance-enhancing drugs. Everybody had a big deal about that as well.
Exactly. So, for these women to compete, I mean, I have to say they're brave women. Women, I believe, are strong and the strongest in the world. They're great, but let them compete on the same, on the same level.
Right.
On the what's that on the even playing field.
Yeah, and it's funny, boxing, of all places, to me, boxing is the fairest sport ever. Because in football, you might have a linebacker that weighs more than a running back, and that's just how it works. But in boxing, there's weight classes for everything, right? You were a super featherweight champ. There's a level for everything, and they're not going to let you fight a heavyweight because you're not in the same weight class, and it would be an unfair advantage.
No, that's correct. So these girls here, or these people here, They have to do the same thing, though. They have to train. They have to compete at that same weight. So they have to lose weight. They do have to train. But what I'm saying here is they have an advantage because of the testosterone that affects the muscle mass, that bone density, and the overall athletic performance.
100%. I agree with that. Carlos El Famoso Hernandez, I want to thank you for being with us, brother. I got to take a pause right here. Let everybody know how they can find you on social media and your website, and give them all your information.
Well, yeah, you can just find me on Instagram on carlosfamosohernandez.com. Or, I think that's it. Yeah, Carlos Famoso Hernandez on Instagram.
Perfect. Well, brother,
thank you so much, buddy. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. And if this thing continues, I hope to have you back on the show. Thanks for making yourself available.
Yeah, definitely, man. Just give me a call anytime, right?
You got it, brother. God bless. All right, folks, we continue. More conversation on this because the Olympic Committee has spoken out there about President Thomas Bach. He said that these are both women. Meanwhile, you've got the IBA saying, no, these are both men. We're going to get the opinion of a female boxer, Golden Gloves champion Cara Castronuova, scheduled to join us straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We have two boxers who are born as a woman, who have been raised as a woman, who have a passport as a woman, and who have competed for many years as women. And this is the clear definition of a woman. There was never any doubt about them being a woman.
That is, again, Mr. Bach, Thomas Bach, the president of the International Olympic Committee, saying that both Algerian boxer Imani Khalif and Taiwanese boxer Lin Yu Ting are women. But the International Boxing Association said at the press conference on Monday, I'm going to repeat that to you, conclusively, they said these two fighters are, quote, male. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about this with somebody, again, who understands this, but from a different perspective. A female boxer, Cara Castronuova, is a two-time Golden Glove champion, winning those at Madison Square Garden, New York City. Cara was also a celebrity trainer on the TV show The Biggest Loser. She also had a job I've always wanted to have, to be a ring announcer. How cool is that? You also see Cara on Newsmax TV. She's one of the co-hosts on Wise Guys on Newsmax. Cara Castronuova, welcome.
Hey, and most importantly, Rich, I wanted to put in that I was a referee and a judge, so I feel like that's like the most applicable experience I have because I worked for USA Boxing, which is the American sanctioning body for amateur boxing that sends athletes to the Olympics. So I was a timekeeper, a referee, a judge, a coach as well. So I have a lot of inside knowledge on how this stuff works, and I just wanted to point that out.
That's thank you for doing that. And so as a judge, that gives a very unique perspective. I mean, I was really looking forward to getting your perspective because you're a woman and a boxer, but a woman boxer who was a boxing judge is even better, and a referee. So when you hear the IBA officials say these are males, and you hear the IOC president say these are women, what do you say?
Well, I just look to you as more proof, and the Olympic Committee is literally going off of the word of these two boxers. They've literally said, and I love the way that the media has completely convoluted this whole story over the past week and, reversed it, but these two people have never actually ever even come out and said anything to, prove their case. They said that they're women on their passport, which is something that's common that a lot of people say around the world that are not biological women. You could be a woman on woman on a driver's license here in New York, I guess you could do that all around the world. So the official statement from the Olympic Committee and the IOC was that these individuals are women on their passports. They've been competing as women, and therefore they are women. They've never tested them to be women. The IBO tested them, and they failed genetic tests. They failed testosterone level tests. All points point to that they are biological men, possibly raised as women. Who knows? But they're biological men, and that's the end of the story. I don't know how the whole story got twisted to, oh, maybe one of them has a genetic defect that gives her the XY chromosome, which I looked into, by the way. That means that you're a male that has a genetic defect, which means that which means that your male private part did not come out, but it's inside of your body. But everything else about you is male. You went through male puberty. You never went through female puberty, and you have all the advantages of a male, but you have a defect that made your male private part never come out. But you are a male. So that's the scenario that everyone's trying to say now, but that still doesn't make that person a female. But that person has never come out and said that was the case. Never made a statement about that. So I don't know how that wild media rumor started. As far as I'm concerned, the burden is up to these two athletes to show that they are females, because it's setting a terrible precedent now in the world where athletes can just come in, take over the sport. They could say, well, I'm a female. They don't even say they're trans, because if you're trans, then there's the debate, and then they could be banned from boxing possibly, as they have been sometimes in the past. Now all they have to say is, I'm a woman, I'm not trans. It says that on my passport. What does this mean for the future of women's sports? There's no future of women's sports if this continues.
Now, Cara Castronuova, I know you did some wrestling in high school. Did you wrestle girls? Did you wrestle guys? Do you feel it's different in that sport?
It's different. I wrestled guys. I lost every single match. I was 18 years old, and I was trying to.
Girls.
There was no
you would have
women's
had a better
team.
chance.
And it was different. Listen, there was no women's team at the time, and I had no choice. But I was going in with a disadvantage, not an advantage. And I wanted to point out in the Olympics, a female was just disqualified for not making weight. It was like a matter of a quarter of a pound, and she was disqualified because the safety of the boxer and the fighters in wrestling and boxing is what's supposed to come most important. That's why there's weight divisions, and they don't let people fight if they're overweight, yet they're letting biological men fight biological females in the very same Olympics. So I have wrestled males, and the strength on them is completely different. I've boxed males in sparring, and they have to hold back their power, or else I would be knocked out. And it's just like night and day. I've had injuries from boxing that you can't even imagine from females. So I can't even imagine if I was fighting a male who was hitting me with full power. It would completely, possibly knock me out, permanent brain injury, whatever it is.
Serious stuff. Folks, Cara Castronuova, again, is a two-time Golden Glove champ, and she's become quite the political commentator. She is on Wise Guys on Newsmax. Cara, let them know where they can catch the show.
Well, Newsmax, 10 p.m. on Saturday nights. You could check me out with John Tobacco on Wise Guys, and we talk about topics like this. And it's also on 11:30 on Newsmax. And also read me at the Gateway Pundit. And follow me on Twitter if you can. I like to weigh in on these subjects, but I don't think this is political. This is just about, old school feminism. What happened to the old school feminists that actually fought for women? Now it's like completely, if you're a feminist, you're looked at like you're the devil. It's very weird.
Yeah, it really is. Cara, let everybody know your handle on Twitter and Instagram.
At Cara Castronuova on Twitter, same on Instagram, so please follow me. And like I said, check us out on Newsmax at 10 p.m. on Wise Guys, and read the Gateway Pundit.
Thanks for being here, Cara. Check her out on Newsmax TV this Saturday. I'll be on the show with them, so make double sure you're checking it out. Cara, I appreciate you. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more. Plus, what is Google doing? Why are they censoring? We're going to get the scoop on that straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So President Trump was on with Maria Bartiromo discussing Google and censorship, and he had some pretty strong words for Google. Listen to this.
Google has been very bad. They've been very irresponsible. And I have a feeling that Google is going to be close to shutdown because I don't think Congress is going to take it. I really don't think so. Google has to be careful.
Google has to be careful is what he says. Now, Google is, from everything I could see, from all accounts, my own anecdotal stuff, blocking everything, right? If you put in the videos all over the place, you put in assassination attempt, you get every name under the sun, Abraham Lincoln, you name it, but you don't get Trump. And it makes you wonder why. Obviously, we know why. They don't want you to read about that. They don't want Trump to get any sympathy or any attention from this. I get it. They hate Trump. The question is, can they get away with it? How much of that is allowed? Is political censorship or political discrimination a thing that is allowed and that we should be putting up with? I don't have all the answers. I think it's horrible. But somebody who does understand this a little bit better than I do is Todd Rickets. He's former finance chair of the Republican National Committee. He's co-owner of the Chicago Cubs and a co-founder of Freespoke. It's a search platform that's been tracking Google's bias and censorship issues. Todd Rickets, welcome.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So tell us a little bit about what you guys are tracking at freespoke.com.
Well, really, we're not tracking Google so much as we built another search engine that's an alternative to Google that doesn't have the same practices that Google does. Our whole point was just to have a little competition in the market to give people an alternative from Google in a search engine that is not suppressing information, not trying to manipulate what you see, and not trying to form your opinion for you. So Freespoke really was born out of this. I mean, obviously, this has caught the eye of President Trump recently because we've seen so much about how assassination attempt or Trump rally is being suppressed by Google when you search those things. But it goes way back. And the reason we started this is I noticed this 15 years ago. I would use Google, and I was saying to myself, I'm like, these results are not making any sense to me. And I got lucky when I had this idea of kind of starting a new search engine. I was pitching it to a prospective investor, and I said, well, let's just type NRA into Google and see what we get. And we literally there was like 3 ads for anti-gun groups, and then there were like 4 or 5 links to anti-gun groups, and then like the 7th or 8th thing below the fold, if I can use the journalistic term, below the fold was the actual NRA. And I just said, like, well, when you type NRA, shouldn't the first thing that comes up be the NRA? Because can't they know what you're looking for? And so it's not new, this idea that Google suppresses information. And I mean, if you go back to 2016, they obviously suppressed information on the Hunter Biden laptop. And in 2020, they suppressed all kinds of things about, 2020 suppressed all things about Hunter Biden laptop. They suppressed all sorts of stuff about COVID, about anybody who said anything that was not the party line on COVID, that was questioning whether or not we should be taking these vaccines. They've worked with the UN to suppress anybody that has a dissenting view on climate change. And I like to say to people, I'm like, I'm not a climate change denier, nor am I a big climate change proponent. What I'd like to see is all the information so I can make up my own mind. And so I've always had this view that I have a lot of faith in the American people, like I have faith in myself, that if you give me the information, I can make up my own mind and I'll come up with the right decision. And so like this most recent finding of the antitrust, the DOJ winning its case in court on the antitrust with Google, it's kind of a first step. We'll see where that takes us, but it's not unprecedented that in our country, when we find that there's one company that has too much influence in one industry, that we break them up. So we'll see where that leads us, and really what we really need is just a little more competition in the search realm.
Now, Todd Rickets, being that you're a businessman and you understand politics, and I think this is a question that you'll be able to field well. It seems to me that Google does a lot for people that are not conservatives, not Republicans, right? So if you're progressive, liberal, Democrat, it works well for you. And the current administration coming in there with this case, this antitrust case, is this legitimate, or is it more kind of like lawfare, like, hey, look, we need you to do more of what you're doing, like, almost like pressure, a little arm twisting?
No, I think it comes from an honest concern that Google has 90% market share in the search industry, and they make their money through advertising. And so I think that actually comes from a legitimate concern that they wield too much influence over this industry. And it's time to really start questioning that, especially, I mean, there's so many levels to this when you dig into, like Google itself as an institution is left-leaning. And then it even has their programmers that are a layer down or so, they're more left-leaning. And so sometimes I'm like, well, gosh, do they really, who's running the asylum there? Are the inmates running the asylum at Google? And so, yes, the executives are left-leaning, but their employees are far more left-leaning. And do they really know exactly what is in their code? It'd be a great question for somebody to ask them in front of Congress is like, do you truly understand the algorithms that run your code? Or is it run by your programmers who are a bunch of young kids? And remember, there's a huge number of programmers at Google who are on H-1B visas coming from China. And so that's another that's a whole nother discussion to have about okay, where are these kids coming from? And you say to yourself, oh well, Chinese students, that they're just Chinese students, but the Communist Party doesn't let anybody out of China unless they know exactly who they are and what they believe. And so this idea that there's thousands of Chinese programmers at Google, it's another question to be asked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Todd Rickets, I know we have you scheduled for one segment, but would you be able to stick around for another round? I wanted to ask you about the fundraising and the outlook on this new VP candidate.
Sure.
You got it. Folks, we're coming right back with Todd Rickets.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. No hair, no care, and live on the air, it's Rich Valdez.
If you're in the stock market, if you care about your paycheck, you go with Trump. If that's what you do.
You do?
Yeah, well, he wants to cut your taxes.
Oh, he wants to cut taxes.
Your taxes.
My taxes got raised enormously, as you know, under the last Trump administration.
I don't know if he wants to cut your president.
No. I'm in a blue state.
That's Jim Cramer and his colleague, and he says he's going to cut your taxes, and the guy says, no, not my taxes. I'm in a blue state. My taxes don't get cut. They only go up is the gist of it. Folks, welcome back. We continue our conversation with Todd Rickets, former finance chair of the Republican National Committee, co-founder of Freespoke.com, and co-owner of the Chicago Cubs. Todd Rickets, we have who I like to call Kamala Harris, the vice president of the United States. She's picked Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. Both seemingly, I'm going to say radical leftists, but by policy, real close to that for sure. And neither one of them has an incredible record on policy achievements in the area of finance and doing really well for income earners at any level, really, in their state. How does this, bode for the, I guess, being a, former finance chair from a fundraising perspective and politically speaking, moving into the general?
Well, I think the interesting part about, from a fundraising point of view, I think the Trump campaign is doing fine Kamala Harris seems to have raised a fair bit of money relatively quickly, which isn't that surprising. If you're looking at this from like the Trump side, at least they hadn't spent any money banging in on Biden yet. Like they kind of hadn't started their campaign, so they were keeping all their money, keeping their powder dry, so to speak, until now. Mm-hmm. So now at least they know what they're up against. And I just think like picking Governor Walz is a sign that Democrats feel that they need to shore up that upper Midwest. If you think of like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as these kind of upper Midwest states that have historically been relatively blue, but in the past couple of elections have been very, very close. Obviously, Trump won those states in 2016 and then lost them narrowly in 2020. And Minnesota is a state that President Trump has always wanted to win over entirely, whereas because he came so close to winning it both 16 and 20.
Right.
So this is a sign where Vice President Harris thinks that she needs to have someone that's like relatively popular in the upper Midwest and hopefully shore up not just Minnesota but Wisconsin and the rest of it.
Now, from a political perspective, my sense is that this race really isn't about personality. I think a lot of that ended with all of the lawfare against Trump and the indictments and all of that, and people that didn't even like him anymore started to kind of sympathize with him, saying this guy, they're going to put this guy in jail for 400 years and 91 counts, felony counts, and all this other stuff. And then they try to kill him, and the assassination attempt, and he gets shot in the ear, and all this other stuff. Where I think people have kind of gotten past the personality stuff, and they've really made it about the issues. Where he's kind of like the dark horse candidate that they're almost rooting for because they're like, man, what a story! They're trying to kill this guy, and they don't like where their pocketbook is at. Do you think that changes with the introduction of Kamala Harris?
No, I don't think that does a whole heck of a lot, right? I think that. President Trump, obviously, he was coming out of his presidency. His popularity was probably at a low, but this constant and incessant lawfare that's been launched at him by the left is really it sounds crazy to talk about, but it turns him into the victim here, right?
Right.
And when you start thinking about people feeling sorry for Donald Trump, like as a Democrat, you should be concerned.
Yeah.
That there's this idea, there's this empathy and sympathy for this guy who, on the surface, you would think it would be hard to feel sorry for, just because of everything the way he talks and so on, because he's such a go-getter and he's so aggressive when he gets out in front of the public. But that's what they've done. They've turned him into this person where people actually empathize. And they're like, gosh, you know what? If they can come after him for bookkeeping records from 20 years ago, they can come after me. Right? What's stopping them from coming after me? And I think that's actually an honest question that all Americans should be saying to themselves, is that, when the government is so willing to so vigorously go after one person at so many different levels on all sorts of frivolous counts, you should be concerned about your own freedom. And start thinking about this idea, like Trump's lucky that he has the ability to defend himself with the right lawyers. But if you're not wealthy, how do you defend yourself from that?
Yeah, if you don't have the $175 million in cash, what do you do? You're screwed.
Yeah, what do you do? Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, I'm not like a conspiracy theorist or a revolutionary or anything, but our government was set up to be for the people, of the people, and when it stops working for the people, we start to have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here?
Right. And I feel like a good portion of the electorate, at least the part that I don't want to say the part that matters, but I think the part that's volatile, that's not tied down to any candidate, the middle, soft Democrats, that, not sure which way they're going. I feel like they're there and they're looking at this and they're questioning and they're wondering, and now they're getting bombarded by the media saying, oh my gosh, Kamala Harris, she's terrific. Oh, Tim Walz, he's so moderate. And they're trying to paint this picture that really doesn't exist. And I don't know, my gut tells me that Americans are just way smarter than that.
That's what you would hope. You would hope. Freespoke sort of built on that whole idea that we give, respect to the intelligence of the American citizen, to be able to discern the truth if given all the facts. And hopefully they can see through that and see that Kamala Harris she's not a moderate, and Governor Walz is neither a moderate either. So,
how do you think they sell against the idea of the economy? Or maybe it's my own bias, but don't you think that Kamala Harris is kind of inextricably linked to the Biden economy?
Yeah, there's no question. And Rich, I got to tell you, every time I go to the grocery store, I think about it. I'm like, how are people affording groceries? I mean, I live in like a relatively upper middle class neighborhood, and if I'm feeling it, if I'm like not buying the cookies that I love because they're $8 when they used to be $4, like what are people doing that we're struggling already or just getting by already?
And you own a baseball team.
All these people.
That says a lot.
Yeah, that's right. We have a baseball team, and I'm cutting back. And so when you think about people, the average household income in this country is right around $75,000 a year. And so you put that up, and you put in, a few $1,000s for federal taxes, maybe $1,000 for state taxes. You add in the sales tax, Social Security tax. So you've already taken a bit of a bite out of that. And you look at what you have to take home each month and start thinking about, like, okay, well, what is the cost of rent or a mortgage? What's the cost of energy in the way of, like, heating your home or putting gas in your car? All those prices have rocketed up over the last few years. And so all those people are feeling that bite. And I feel like they probably feel it the most when they go to the grocery store, because that's when they're thinking about it.
Yeah,
because, like, you have to buy gas. You have to put electricity in your house.
And you need gas. That's the truth. And the electric bill. Let's not even get into that. That's another thing that's going up. Todd Rickets, co-founder of Freespoke, a search engine platform that's been rivaling Google, and former RNC finance chair, co-owner of the Chicago Cubs. I want to thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, sir.
All right. Thanks for having me, and I'll come back anytime you want.
You bet. Looking forward to it. Godspeed. Folks, we continue with your calls and more. And remember, Open Phone America's coming up at the top of hour number 3. I'll give you the phone number for that, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We go to the phones. Let's go to Boise, Idaho. KBFI is the radio station. The caller, our buddy Paul. Paul, go for it, my man. Paul, are you there? Paul, going once, going twice. Sold to Sarah from Bedford, Indiana on WBIW. Sarah, go right ahead.
Yeah, great show as always. I want to tell you that caller, I believe it was Buck from L.A., who was talking about Trump being wrong about the economy not rebounding, when he didn't get elected. Well, anyway, that makes me mad on the Red Hornet, because I remember those years, and if people would remember correctly, the left was going on about COVID, and it was going to be worse than the Black Plague, and so we had to shut the economy down, and Trump actually tried to compromise because he's not a scientist, so he's willing to listen to so-called experts, and implemented some shutdown stuff on behalf of the left. Left wanted this, put a lot of people out of work, hurt people a lot, so of course the economy slows. And then, by the way, Pfizer chooses to release his vaccine until after the 2020 election. So, of course, the economy speeded up when it got reopened under Biden.
Exactly. And then Biden tries to ride off into the sunset like he's like the hero of the day. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. WBIW, shout out to you, folks. Open Phone America's coming up right now. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 of the program. We're live, we're national, happy to be here. It's Wednesday night, and the phone number if you want to join the conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Plenty on the table tonight. We've been talking about the International Olympic Committee and the drama that they're having with the IBA, the International Boxing Association, and their discrepancy. The IBA says, we've reviewed the results of the test. These are males. The IOC says they are women. No bueno. We had a lot of discussion on that earlier with former Golden Gloves champion, female champion, Cara Castronuova. And you can check her on Newsmax, by the way, this weekend. And we also had some discussion with former IBF champion, Carlos El Famoso Hernandez. And really, really interesting. They both agreed that as boxers that these people qualify as men and they should be fighting men, not women. Anyway, that was an interesting conversation. If you missed that, make sure you check it out at richvaldez.com. Right after the program, you'll be able to hear all of our archives. And what else? We had some interesting conversation with Todd Rickets regarding the censorship coming from Google. Google got themselves into a world of hurt. And we talked about our buddy Tampon Tim, the weirdo, Walz. And Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, right? I was getting Minnesota and Montana confused. It's my ADHD. Anyway, he's all over the place. Listen to this. On July 13th, when Trump was shot in the ear because the bullet missed his head, Tim Walz, who the media swears is a moderate. He's a very moderate. He's a Midwestern. He's moderate. He's a very Midwestern, right? You kept hearing that in the media. Mr. Moderate, Mr. Midwestern. This is what he had to say about Trump right after he got shot. Listen to this.
These guys are just weird. That's who they are. So it isn't much else. Don't give them the power. Look, are they a threat to democracy? Yes. Are they going to take our rights away? Yes. Are they going to put people's lives in danger? Yes. Are they going to endanger the planet by not dealing with climate change? Yes. They're going to do all that. But don't lift these guys up like they're sometimes the heroes. Everybody in this room knows, I know it as a teacher, a bully has no self-confidence. A bully has no strength. They have nothing. The fascists depend on fear. The fascists depend on us going back. But we're not afraid of weird people. We're a little bit creeped out, but we're not afraid. But look, and then as you heard this, and one day ago, a poll came out and showed Kamala Harris up 10 points and Donald Trump getting his ass handed to him here in Minnesota. So, sorry, but he's here today in the state of hockey to complete his trifecta. He lost in 16, he lost in 20, he loses in 24.
That's Tim Walz talking a tough game to people that like him, right? And again, he's popular enough to win in his state. Will Trump lose Minnesota? I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you, the other day I posited on Twitter, what is going on in Minnesota? You would think that given its Midwestern positioning, that it would be a little bit more Midwestern. Yeah, just a little bit more like Michigan, a little bit more like some of the other states that have their progressive big cities, metropolitan areas. And even if that spills over into an electoral majority, it's not a realistic majority, right? And what I mean by that is kind of like the example I was making last night or the night before about New York, right? New York is a bastion of conservatism. All of upstate New York, the biggest part of New York, like on the map, the largest part of it is very conservative. But for New York City, a very small part of it with a lot of people that come from other places like California. That's what makes the difference. And you have that very similar situation in Minneapolis, St. Paul, right? Those twin cities there. You also have this big influence from the teachers union and Tim Walz being that guy. I mean, Tim Walz is really, again, to the left of Joe Biden. And I just find the whole thing remarkable that they've picked him. My instinct, and again, I could be wrong, and I'll have to apologize to all of you, but my instinct says this is not the guy America wants. Now, they're going to try and rebrand him as some sort of moderate, as some sort of middle-of-the-road. He's just your average center-left Democrat, but he's not. I mean, this is the guy presiding over a state where he's made the state. Not every state that has a Democrat governor is a sanctuary state for people that want to become the opposite sex, right? If you are underage and want to get some sort of sex change, hormone therapy, stuff like that, he's created a sanctuary in his state. He's gone as far as revamping the state's child welfare regulations to include taking your kid away from you if you don't support their transition. Look it up. Google it. I'm not making it up. Those are all real things. But yet it's good old Governor Tim Walz that is somehow the standard bearer for the Democrat Party. Him and Kamala Harris. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. When you have a governor like Tim Walz that is supported by the likes of Bernie Sanders, we've got a problem. I want you to hear Bernie Sanders on CNN yesterday saying if Republicans want to attack the Harris-Walz ticket for raising minimum wage, I'll help fund the ads. Listen to this.
Well, I don't want to give Trump's people any advice, but I would suggest if they want to do that, they should read some of the polling. If Governor Walz believes, for example, that we should cut the price of prescription drugs in this country in half to what they are around the rest of the world, over 70% of the American people believe that. You want to attack them for being radical? I'll help pay for the ad. Walz believes we should cut prescription drugs in half. Vote for Trump. I don't think so. The American people overwhelmingly believe, as the governor does, that we should raise the minimum wage to a legal wage. If the Republicans want to attack Walz and Kamala Harris for wanting to raise the minimum wage, I'll help contribute to those advertisements.
Okay,
so I think this whole narrative that if you stand up for working class families, it's somehow a negative is totally absurd. It's only believed by the corporate media and the political establishment. Working people know that the time is long overdue to have a government that represented them rather than just wealthy campaign contributors.
Spoken like a true socialist, right? The Worker Family Party. This is all their euphemisms that they have for introducing communist ideas. And again, some of you are listening, there he goes again with the Red Scare. No, the Red Scare is real. And Bernie Sanders is the standard bearer for the Red Scare. We should be afraid of a Bernie Sanders. Half of his platform, Bernie 2020, Feel the Burn, remember that? Half of that was literally ripped from the pages of the USSR's Constitution. The paid family leave, all of it. Just pretty remarkable stuff. Anyway, folks, I know that you guys are trying to get online to participate in Open Phone America. I have some more audio I want to share with you, but I promise I'm going to get to your calls. Let us give you the number one more time, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
You know, the power I have as a prosecutor is that with a swipe of my pen, I can charge someone with a misdemeanor, the lowest level offense possible. And by virtue of that swipe of my pen, you will have to go to a courthouse and stand in line. You will have to come out of pocket and hire an attorney. You may get arrested for a few hours. You will be embarrassed in your community. You will miss time from coming onto the Google campus. All because with the swipe of my pen, I've charged you with a crime, which I may choose to dismiss 2 weeks later. It's an incredible amount of power.
It's an incredible amount of power. That is Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. And she's talking about having this power. And she sounds like she's drunk on that power. She sounds like an autocrat. She sounds like a dictator. She sounds like a threat to our democracy is what she sounds like. And we're a constitutional republic. That doesn't mean that, you know, we don't use the elements of democracy. Of course, we have elections where majorities do rule in certain situations. Not in presidential elections, but you get the point. But Kamala Harris, she loves it. She loves this idea of having all this power. Is that the person we want with her finger on the trigger, with the nuclear codes, the ability to end the existence of humanity, of entire planets, entire countries on this planet? I don't think so. It's not who I want. Let's hit the phones. Let's go to Sam, Chicago, Illinois, WLS. Sam, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yeah, howdy. I was listening to your program here, and you know, I had a few thoughts. I mean, and what you just said about Kamala, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, these people, which I personally believe all politicians are kind of awful. You know, like they're the flip side of the same coin, so to speak. You know,
sure.
I think you could agree. But we really need people in there that, you know, give a damn. And I don't think these people give a damn. They're putting on a front like they care, but I really don't think they do to the extent that they claim.
Yeah, well, I don't even hear Kamala Harris making any claims that she cares, or Governor Walz. The only thing I hear them saying is that they're dissatisfied with Trump and that Trump is bad because of this. And if you elect Trump, you lose your freedom. If you elect Trump, you lose your rights. If you elect Trump, you lose your governmental system that they say is a democracy. I haven't heard them say anything about, you know, I love this country. I want to see this country prosper. I want to see you prosper. I want to see it do well. There isn't a patriotic theme in any of that. And I think that's the reason Trump is doing well in the polls and why he has, you know, when he holds a rally, it's always sold out because there are so many people that are attracted to the message of making America great again, making it better than it currently is, making it the way it once was, where people could live their lives and go on 1 or 2 good vacations a year and have enough money to figure out their next emergency and not live paycheck to paycheck and be broke. And I'm glad you called, because a lot of people who are in the position you're in, where you think that most politicians are, you know, either crook A or crook B, or the crook for the red team or the crook for the blue team, but ultimately both crooks. And well, that's likely true, right? That's why a lot of people refer to Washington or the swamp as the uniparty, as if it's one political party, you know, kind of dressed in drag of the other, trying to create contrast, but two sides of the same coin. And while I think there's a good element of that is real and true and exists in Washington, I also think that there are people that care, and I think Trump is among them. I think Trump would have a way better life right now if he was not in politics, right? He likely would not be charged with these crimes that go back 18 and 20 years. He likely would have 175 million more of his dollars in the bank right now. And I think just in general, he would be able to sleep better at night, not getting shot in the ear and because he dodged a bullet meant for his head. But he's enduring all of that because he cares about this country. Whether they want to say he cares about winning or whatever the case they make is fine. I know what I saw. We all know what we saw. There's a million different angles of it, and it looks the same in every single one of them. Shots go off. There's shots going all over the place. None of them hit him. And it takes a good minute or so or close to that, it seemed, for the Secret Service to begin shielding him. So ultimately, I think you have a situation where America's witnessed something that really was a big deal and a historical moment. And I think that's why there's sympathy for Trump. But I think he really is that guy that you're describing. And maybe you don't see him that way, but maybe you do. I don't know your thoughts on that. But I do know that he's the only candidate in this race that's talking about making America better than he found it. Or at least bringing it back to its once greatness that he benefited from and thrived in and was able to create his business and his family and all of that stuff that he enjoys in life came from America being fertile ground for success. And as long as that's no longer the case, we won't have that level of success. And, again, I put myself in Trump's shoes for a moment and I say, if I'm 78, 79 years old, whatever it is that what I want to do all the time? Would I rather play golf and wear a golf shirt and golfing attire, which is a little bit more comfortable than walking around in a suit all the time and flying everywhere every day? I think I'm going to go with the golfing, which I think he still gets a few rounds of golf in, but nothing like he would be doing in his real retirement. Imagine being 79, 80 years old, running the Trump organization. You have 2 capable children, 3, and lots of good people around you to run these companies. But what happens here, Sam? He decides to throw himself into the political arena. He decides to get involved, bringing his wife, his son, who is autistic, his supermodel wife, moves her out of the penthouse apartment that he has on Fifth Avenue to go live in the White House. And again, not a bad change of scenery, I'm sure. But my point is not something he had to do, but something that he wanted to do. Why? Because in my opinion, he loves America. Now, some will challenge that and say, no, he's just an egomaniac. And because he's an egomaniac, being president was one more notch on his belt. That might be true if it was easy. That might be true if it were a simple task. But when you look at the level of effort that it's taken him and nearly being incarcerated, nearly being killed in order to just become president, it's clear this sacrifice is way bigger than himself. Sam in Chicago, Illinois on WLS. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for the call. Hope you'll call back again soon. Folks in Ohio and others that are on hold, we're coming your way straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez. The phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere.
So glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Tensions boiled over tonight at the Nassau legislature when at least one person was arrested. The chaos came during a heated discussion about the county's Mask Transparency Act. The measure makes it illegal to wear a mask in public unless it's for the person's health, religion, or celebratory purposes. A similar state law had been on the books prior to the COVID pandemic.
This law endangers my life. This law endangers the lives of many people.
Bridget Jones is immunocompromised and came from Harlem to speak against the measure.
Criminalizing a tool that literally is PPE, it's a mobility aid, it saves lives.
The county legislature passed the bill along party lines. All 12 Republicans voted in favor. All 7 Democrats abstained. Supporters say it prevents people from committing crimes or acts of violence while hiding behind a mask.
Again, that is a report on the mask law that was just enacted in Long Island, Nassau County in New York, that mimics a similar measure that was proposed at the state level. And what's interesting about this is they had to put a law in because people were wearing masks and creating havoc and conducting crime all over the place, committing crime, I should say, all over the place. So they said, we have to protect our people. We're going to have to go back and undo the damage that was done. And that's what they're trying to do. But I find it remarkable. I really do. I mean, something's working. Let it work. All of a sudden, now they decide it doesn't work. Come on. It's a mask, and you shouldn't have one on in 90-degree weather, right? If you're outside, you're outside. We've learned so much about COVID, and it's like the initial hysteria hasn't gone anywhere for most people, or for some, and that's scary, really is. Concerning, at the very least. Anyway, so that's, I want to get your thoughts on that. Should we be wearing masks everywhere we go? Do you agree with this deal, with this new rule, this new law that says, yeah, you're allowed to not wear a mask. Matter of fact, it's the law. Don't wear a mask unless you're, need to wear a mask. I think that's a pretty fair thing. I can't believe anybody would fight such a thing. Anyway, let us go to the phones. Let's go to our buddy Paul. Paul is calling us from Zanesville, Ohio, WHIZ. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, good evening. I don't know if I heard it right, but it puts shivers down my spine if I did. Did Kamala Harris just say with a swipe of a pen she could put anybody in jail that she wants to?
Yeah, that was file footage of her when she was Attorney General of California. But yeah, she was again bragging that she had all this prosecutorial power.
That's a dictatorship, and they want to call Trump a dictator? I mean, come on, people. Yeah, and I don't know anything about this Walz guy. I've never even heard of him. The first time will be since she picked him for vice president here. So, I mean, what's up? People, you better listen. What that lady just said literally sent shivers up my spine.
Yeah.
And they talk about Trump being the dictator and this and that. Trump don't talk like that. He's like, let's make America great. Let's be for America. And she's talking about, let's put people in jail. I'll do any damn thing I want to do. You better wake up, America. And we don't know enough about the Harris-Walz administration. I don't think they have time, to make a good case for themselves. And from what you said tonight, as I was listening to you tonight, this guy don't sound like he's on the up and up, Rich. I mean, he lied, and he didn't go to Iraq. So I just that scared me, Rich. It really did, and that's what I wanted to say tonight. That's scary, man.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Paul, something I realized with this stuff, and again going back to the report we just heard, right? That in New York they were over the top with you got to wear a mask, you got to wear a mask. My friend was jogging, right? And he was jogging. He had running shorts on, which I don't know if you've ever worn running shorts, but many of them don't even come out of pocket. And if they do, it's a very small, obscure pocket, but no pocket. He had no shirt on. It was 90-something degrees. It was summertime. And he was running on a jogging path. And he was stopped by the police in New York City. And they said, no, you can't do that here. You need to wear a mask. And he was like, what? I'm outside. And they're like, doesn't matter. You're in a public park. He's like, well, I'll stay 6 feet away. And they're like, no. If you want to be here on this public path, you have to wear a mask. And he just complied and went with it because he didn't want to be the next statistic of somebody getting arrested. And that happened. There was a whole lot of that happening. right? In Staten Island, New York, people were defying these orders, and they just doubled down on that. So I say all of that to say is this is an unintended consequence. These people didn't ask for this, but they asked for it, right, indirectly, because they knew what they were going to get with these people. And in effect, they did ask for it. And that's the sad part, that you know that this could happen, and you do it anyway. Anyway, Paul, thank you for your call, my brother. I appreciate it. You are always a great time to chat with. You really are. And I'm going to continue our calls. I want to go to Peoria, Illinois, but I'm going to do that right after the pause. Let's go to JW right after this break. Don't go anywhere, folks. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, we continue with your thoughts and opinions. The phone number, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. And let's go to Peoria, Illinois, WLS in the building. Let's go to JW. JW, what's on your mind? You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Well, good morning, Rich. I find myself more disappointed with the American public all the time. And a lot, especially some of the comments that have been made over the last 15, 20 minutes.
Which in particular?
People keep demanding laws that end up being used against them, and they can't understand, well, how did this happen? Because there's always a consequence as well as an unintended consequence to everything. Yeah. And people just don't seem to wise up. The other thing about it is we talk about police officers, and I used to be a police officer.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, but I was one of the weird ones. I actually believed that my oath required some things of me, so I was kind of a stickler for that. But every person that takes that oath needs to abide by it, which few do. But the problem is the American people want someone else to have to assume responsibility for everything. Your neighbor's playing the music too loud, you expect someone else to deal with that instead of you having to. Someone's breaking into your house, they want to call somebody else to deal with it. Well, if you give other people that responsibility, that power, they're going to turn around and find a way to use it against you, at least in some situations. No matter how good a person is, if you give them that kind of jurisdiction and power, at some point they're going to misuse it. And they're going to make a point of trying to make examples out of people. The American public just has a horrible habit of demanding the very things that they then turn around and scream about and scream it's unjust. Well, we've got far too many laws on the books in this nation, and every one of them were begged for and demanded by the public.
Yeah, you know what, JW? I think you make an excellent point. And this is really the principle of individual responsibility, right? I'm pretty radical. I'll use the word radical in that. And I love having police, and I love having a lot of things. But if I were told one day, listen, you're not going to have cops anymore, we're not going to, I'd be okay. I'd say, you know what, all right, you know what, I'm going to protect myself this way, that way, and the third. Maybe I have to relocate to an area that's a little less densely populated, whatever the case is. But I think we can survive. And I'm not making a case against the police. I'm a big supporter of the police. My brothers both retired from the NYPD. I was actually a volunteer cop for a couple of years, went to a police academy for a little bit. And I say all of that to say is you're right. People need to be able to deal with things on their own. It's not the government's job to be your daddy, period, the end. And we have to remind ourselves and raise our children with that expectation that we have a life to live, and the government is there to help us, not to help us live our lives, just to help us in however we need that help, right? It's our government of, for, and by the people, not us as subjects to that government. JW.
Well, one of the things I've told a lot of people, they would scream about police, and some of it I understand. I probably have more issues with cops now than I ever did because I understand what the job is and I know their job.
Yeah.
But the more laws you pass, the more cops you need, the more authority that you're granting them, because now you've given them more laws to enforce upon you. Right. And it just mystifies me how grown people have to have things like this explained to them. As I said, the older I get, the less faith I have in my fellow man, and the less faith I have in Americans, because it's we want to be sympathetic. Well, let's be smart enough to realize how that can turn around and slap us. Let's be smart enough to know good intentions don't necessarily end up in good results. And the last thing is I understand why people don't necessarily think this way. And what I always tell people is, look, we've had a Hitler, we've had a Stalin, we've had a Pol Pot. Just because you aren't malevolent doesn't mean other people aren't. And a person that's smart and malevolent will figure a way to take anything that you do and turn it upon you. And because most people aren't ill-willed, for the most part, they don't consider what they've just handed the other person. And it's just, we've got a society now of people that just either can't or just will not think. And it's frightening to me.
And people need to think. People need to think for themselves, act for themselves, do for themselves, because we're losing touch with individual responsibility. And I think that's a cornerstone of our constitutional republic. It's really kind of how it works. If we don't have that individualism, that independence to do for oneself, we automatically rely on the altar of big government. And that's not a place I want to be. JW, thank you for your call. Peoria, Illinois, WLS 890. Thank you for the call, sir. Let me see. We continue. Let us go to Eric. Eric is in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. KWWR. Welcome.
Well, hey, Rich. So good to be on your program. And actually kind of talking, a little bit where you said that, people, personal responsibility. I've been thinking a way to liberal-proof America and to also go into that public or responsibility is that the Republicans, if they were to take over the presidency and the two houses, why would they not start and put together a balanced budget amendment? If you do that, as I said, it would liberal-proof America in the that they couldn't fund their stupid projects that they want.
Yeah. The only issue with that is that you need the liberals in order to get to a balanced budget amendment, right? To get any amendment passed, you're going to need them to be on board. And most politicians that live and subsist off of the government themselves, they're not going to be on board to kind of cut their own nose off despite their own face. So that is it's the same reason we don't have term limits, right? It's just, to me, I think it's a non-starter for certain politicians that they're thinking, no, I worked so hard to get here. I want to stay here. I'm going to be here as long as they'll let me continue running for it. They want to be the next Nancy Pelosi, the next Mitch McConnell, the next Chuck Schumer, the next Chuck Grassley, right? And ultimately, I mean, I live in a fantasy land of my own conservative ideas where I wish that wasn't the case, but that is the case, right? That's constitutionally the case that we have in America. And I don't know that I can change it right now, but we finally have a conversation that's out there that I think is gaining momentum of people saying, well, just because we don't have that conversation now doesn't mean that we can't work on creating that situation where it can become a reality. And I'd love that. I'd love to see a balanced budget amendment. I'd love to see Congress actually balance a budget. I'd love it. I don't think it's happened in 2 decades or more. And I would love to see term limits, right? Not just on the president, but on members of Congress. I would absolutely love it. But it's not where we are. And maybe that's a I don't know, maybe a nihilistic way of looking at it. But I don't think it is. I think it's a realistic way. But again, that's what usually the pessimists always say that, right? I'm not pessimistic. I'm just real. Yeah, it sounds like real pessimistic. So perhaps I'm guilty of that myself. But I really would love to see that. I'd also like to see a return to the gold standard. If we're on my conservative wish list, I'd love to see us strengthen our currency that way. I'd love us to no longer print money that we can't back up. Because, just being tied to a gold standard doesn't mean that that ends all of that. It kind of stops some of it, but it doesn't end it all. And I would love to see that too. There's so many things that we need to be able to do. We need to be able to balance how we operate our peace through strength initiatives. We ultimately need a robust military. There's a lot of people there that right now, if they had their way, the United States would be out of business internationally. We would not be, we wouldn't have military bases in other countries. There's a lot of people that just believe that we need to isolate American public policy to America and isolate it to just what's here. I don't particularly subscribe to that because I think it's a little bit more complex than that. I think we do need those things. But ultimately, Eric, to your point, from the land of El Rushbo, ultimately, the bottom line here is we have certain, I don't want to say guardrails, but certain constraints, certain limitations that we have to operate within the confines of that. It's kind of like free speech. If we want to have free speech, we have to be able to deal with certain elements of free speech that we don't like. But we shouldn't have to deal with things where people are stealing someone else's flag to stomp on it and burn it and desecrate it, right? If you want to bring your own flag and desecrate it, then that's free speech. Stealing somebody else's flag and then doing that or ripping it down from the government, that's not free speech, right? And we should prosecute those people, and we should be aggressive with that because that's something that shouldn't happen. And I would love it, like Trump said, I would love to see that become a crime and that to be one of the limitations on free speech is that you can't burn the flag. I'd love that. But again, it's where we are. Anyway, thank you again for the call. I appreciate it. KTTR, big shout out to you guys, Eric in Cape Girardeau. Folks, we are going to take a pause right here. Coming right back, we got Clay Soil, Montana, KOFI, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, we continue with your calls. Let's go to Clay Soil, Montana, KOFI, and check in with Lance. Lance, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Quickly.
Good evening, sir. Thank you. Just given your extensive background with the Gray One and now with the opportunity you have before you and being a professed man of faith, do you feel that scripturally we're at that point in the world where we are trading what's good for evil and evil for good?
I think we've probably been at that stage for a very long time. And if you read the Revelation, I think it's an eye-opener. How long it takes us to get to the end of that story is a different question. Lance, thanks for the call. Hasta la próxima. God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.